Okay, our co-host is checking the name list. Please change your name to the registered name. And our webinar would begin in 2 minutes later, as expected. Cool. By the way, if you are interested in buying some of the XAG clothes, like jacket, t-shirt, displaying on the scrolling slides now, or some drone model, please do not hesitate to contact your sales representative. Did all attendees come in? Since almost all registered attendees are here, let's get started. Everybody's here? Let's get started. This is our second episode of this series, Safer Skies Through Education. Charles Cho, Chief Training Pilot of our Australian partner, will unveil the training stories and share their valuable experience here. Like previous episode, I will briefly introduce the background and then give the floor to Charles. After his sharing, we will have a 40-minute Q&A session. Your microphone would be muted till then. During that session, if you have any questions for the presenter, you may raise your hand and your microphone would be turned on by co-host. Or you can just use the chat feature to send messages, which is more preferable. Now let's please welcome our presenter today, Charles Cho, who have more than 15-year experience in the automotive and aviation industry. As the founder and director of Revolution AG, he has been a commercial pilot, RPA pilot, and instructor for more than 10 years, expert in aviation safety, and also a safety advisor for many RPA companies. Now let's give the floor to Charles Cho. Hello, Charles. Can you share your screen?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
So give me 1 second.
Wow, cool.
Okay. Now, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see the
screen. Carol, can you see my screen?
Yes,
Some technical difficulties here. Okay. Now, if everyone's ready, I would like to proceed. Now, I'd like to just introduce myself. My name is Charles. I am from the Australian branch of EXAG. I'm the Chief Training Pilot and also the Director of Revolution Ag, who is the distributor here in Australia for EXAG. Now, I have been working with EXAG for now nearly 10 years. And I am also a commercial pilot myself, and I have been operating unmanned aircraft ever since 2009. So that will make it now nearly coming to 13 years. In Australia, I do provide a lot of training to all our operators. And today, through my presentations, I hope I'll be able to bring new ideas to the table and maybe give some good suggestions in terms of help our operators in other countries to increase their safety performance and become a safer operator. And what we find through safety, we'll be able to actually generate a lot of profit, efficiency. We're able to bring a lot more confidence in our operations of our operators and also pilots. So you have helped us to gain, actually make more money in the end through our operations as well. So without further ado, let me start our presentation. Okay, now, why is it important, people might ask, to receive proper training before your operation? Now, proper training is, in different countries, there's different standards. Now, I have talked to regulators from the FAA, the CAA, so FAA is American, CIA is Canadian, and also, of course, CASA in Australia. Those are the leading bodies at the moment in the world in terms of regulating drone operations in our skies and how to actually share our airspace with manned aviation. Because myself, I fly in both manned and unmanned aviation, so I know exactly what the hazards and the difference in importances of having those clear guidelines in terms of what to do. And today, through the slideshows I want to present, I hope that I'll be able to identify some of the importances and also to listen to your viewpoints of how all can improve the safety of our operations. Now, the last several years, CASA in Australia have introduced a lot of different rules in terms of private and commercial use of drones. Now, you will be able to find in some of my slides, there is some links. Now, if you weren't able to connect or access those links, please let me know at the end of the presentation. More than happy to share that to you so you can look into it further. Now, when we started in Australia, everything here is still new in terms of commercial applications of UAVs, or what we call drones. Now, that's why we find the importance to work with industry specialists. In this case, in Australia, we partner with FPV Australia in RPA pilot. RPA stands for Remote Pilot Aircraft. In terms of drone training, the license that's required in Australia for a drone pilot, it's called REPL, Remote Pilot's License. And also there is a license that's required for the business, which is Remote Operator Certificate. So those are the basic of getting started in commercial operations of UAVs in Australia. Other than that, in our EXAG system, you also requires your chemical qualifications. Now, the chemical qualifications mainly focus on the application, the transport, and the safety handle of the chemicals. Now in Australia, we have partnered with ChemCert, which is one of Australia's biggest chemical safety trainer. And actually, we actually just had a big meeting with their CEO yesterday in our office 2 days ago, coming to agreement on our partnership. There's also a link and also actually a QR code. I'm not sure everyone can see it on the bottom right-hand side of our screen there. If you're interested, please scan that QR code, have a look at the training that's required to become a chemical applicator pilot in Australia. And also there is the CASTA link there as well, which is the Australian regulator for aviation safety. Now, ICSAG, we definitely focus on the safety of all our pilots. Now, we do offer classes from beginner level all the way to expert levels. Our own operating pilots will have someone that have never flown a drone before, up to an airline pilot that actually flies an Airbus A380. Having them to transit to be suited and fully qualified to operate our aircraft have to go through quite extensive training. The training could take up to 6 weeks to complete. Having good knowledge of those rules and regulations, it is most important in the safe manner of our operations. Now, each one of the commercial operators in Australia do hold a license, and with that license, there is an application management plan and procedure, as well as your operations plan and procedure. In those plans and procedure actually give you the guidelines in terms of what to do and why it is important to be compliant to those guidelines within the organization. Not knowing the safety operation of the aircraft or those guidelines would definitely result in disaster. And through our training, we'll also highlight those disasters and what could be the worst results. And in Australia, the actual, the hefty fines, and even the worst penalty is actually going to jail for not following those rules and guidelines. Another aspects of flying the aircraft, having those licenses here, unlike some countries, does give you a certain perks as well. For us, for example, we can fly right next to a military airport. We can actually even fly inside a military airport with the right clearances. So having those licenses and qualifications does also give you perks, not just limiting yourself and just not knowing the rules. It actually gives you advantages to do operations that's outside the normal operating conditions. And being educated with those knowledge will also help you during those operations to operate safely. For example, all our operators, all our pilots do hold an aeronautical radio operator certificate. What that means, you also be able to operate an airband radio, allows you to communicate with the control tower of your local airport, and also having a listening watch to what the local air traffic is doing. So you'd be able to get out of the way, enable you to be a lot more situation awareness. Then again, that will increase your confidence of your operation, make you a safer operator. Now, another benefits, being a qualified operator, some of those are highlighted there, giving you different clearances outside normal operating conditions. You'd be able to operate the aircraft under special operations like area applications with the approval from the EPA. That's for New South Wales and Australia. Every state do have their own legislator in terms of the area application. Now, this is just a quick video. This is a current affair, which is pretty big TV news channel. And this is about the importance of training. So this is myself on there. This is a couple of years ago. If there's any question on this video, feel free to actually type it in the chat column there. We're also going to touch on airspace.
And there's no better bloke to teach us the ropes than Ace After an in-depth tutorial on aviation rules and regulations, I'm ready to take to the skies behind the controls of this supersized drone, which looks more like a Victor lawnmower. I might feel like Maverick, but like most Aussie part-timers, I'm more of a goose.
Steve, don't worry. I'm going to start you off with a small one. This one here, we're going to do your first flight on.
While getting airborne is one thing, backyard drone users have well and truly had their wings clipped by aviation authorities thanks to accidents like these.
The penalty could be fines up and above beyond $10 and can be as long as 5 years imprisonment for not doing the right thing.
A Sydney operator copped an $800 fine of a bridge. Aerial firefighting efforts. And then there's the recent turbulence in the UK, with drones hovering at Gatwick Airport, disrupting more than 1,000 flights. On Christmas Eve, our Civil Aviation Security Authority, CASA, said it's going to crack down on drone operators, particularly around airports.
There's no reason why we should fly around airport. There's plenty of airspace out there that's non-controlled. As long as you stay low.
Large drones like this one used for crop spraying have built-in security systems, preventing them from flying near airports or above certain heights where they could bring down an airline. But Charles Chow says even much smaller drones have the potential to cause a catastrophe, and the onus is on the operator to know drones' do's and don'ts.
In Australia, the rules are under 120 metres above ground level. You got to not fly closer to 30 metres to anyone that's not involved in your operation. You must control only one drone at a time. Stay during daylight unless you have approval to fly at night. There's a lot of perks from becoming a licensed pilot and enable you to get those necessary approvals and insurance to in place.
The drone industry in Australia is literally flying. It's now worth more than $3 billion.
So that's a quick video in terms of our operations importance, and that also identifies the legal requirements for following those rules and what sort of penalties you would actually face if you do not follow those rules. Once again, to everyone, I apologize that we have to use the DJI system. However, it's what the most general public are used to without being a professionally trained operator, and especially not for ag operations. And let me just go to the next slide. Now, in Australia, the steps to become a qualified operator. Now, here's just a quick, simple steps, just to give everyone a reference in terms of what you have to encounter. In Australia, first thing that you got to do is apply for an ARN, so an aviation reference number, which all aviators gets. Doesn't matter if you're a drone pilot or an airline pilot or even a helicopter pilot or crop dusting pilot. Once you get that, you'll get your basic report, which allows you to fly up to 7 kilograms. Now, the 7 kilograms goes by the maximum takeoff weight of the aircraft, not the empty weight of the aircraft. The maximum takeoff weight of the aircraft includes all the payloads, includes all the batteries and everything that's capable of actually to be attached onto the aircraft. After that, you need to be type indoors on that aircraft. So anything over 25 kilograms, it has to be type Pacific. So with our system being 38.5 kilograms, it has to be specially licensed just for that particular airframe. So if you want to fly a P30, P40, V40, V50, P80 or P100, they all have to be specialized licensed individually to your license. Now, an AROC, which is what I mentioned before, holding a AROC does give you the privilege of operating in a controlled airspace or restricted airspace. Having a REOC which allows you and your business to operate in a for claiming or operating for money. So then you'd be able to go out and charge people for spray jobs, exactly what we do. It also enables you to apply for special operations. So for example, if you want to fly multiple aircraft with one pilot station, if you want to fly at night time, if you want to fly beyond visual line of sight, those are all classified as special operations. And in terms of spraying, in Australia, have all different state rules and regulations. In New South Wales, which is where our head office is based here in Australia, is New South Wales EPA, stands for Environmental Protection Agency. They do issue a license for both the business and the pilot. And before you go to them, you need to actually complete your CAMCERT certification, which enables you to prepare and apply chemicals to control pests and disease, and also the transport and storage of the chemicals. And most importantly, it teaches you how to manage if there is any spills, during the actual filling of the aircraft or mixing of the chemicals, how to actually use a spill kit, how to correctly use your PPE, so your personal protective equipment. And most importantly, and not least, is insurance. So the insurance for most commercial operations that's required, the cover is 20 million Australian dollars. It is a basic recommendation and actually requirement in most of our operations. So if we go out and do a job for one of our local councils, for example, they will want to see your insurance certificate for public liability for at least $20 million. Now, this is some examples of the contents of our internal training programs. It might sound a little bit overwhelming, and the structures are very similar to manned aviation. So firstly, we would give a general description or information of the aircraft that they're going to be trained, the limitations of what they can do in terms of the CASA approval limitations, your aircraft limitations, and the indicators of the aircraft, signal lights, how to do all your control limitations, so your maximum speed, maximum operating height. That's all part of the limitation section. And after that, we'll go through the emergency procedures, which is very important. And sometimes we'll actually simulate an emergency procedure, how to take over if it's a two-person operation, how to do your emergency landings, and what happens if someone approaches the operations site without prior approval. And of course, then we'll go through the normal procedures, the normal operations of the aircraft. So we'll run through how to actually do your pre-flight checks, your loading of the aircraft, how to actually do your flight planning. Then we'll go through to do your post-flight checks, the washdown of the aircraft. That's all part of your normal procedures. Performance, it's basically going through the performance limitations of the aircraft. What is the maximum dosage chemical that your aircraft can apply? The maximum speed of the aircraft, that would actually then limit you if you are doing seeding, for example. If you want to do a very, very low rate, there's only down to a certain amount that you can apply per hectare. So letting you know that performance of the aircraft is also crucial. Weight and payload of the aircraft, that is necessary because, as everyone knows, most of the aircraft don't just apply liquid, it also can deliver granular applications as well. And I know of some operators and distributors are coming up with their own custom design payload system as well. Then section 7, then we'll talk about description and operations of the aircraft and its systems. Then we'll look at the aircraft handling, service and maintenance, most importantly. And what we find is if we spend more time with our clients, teach them the maintenance of the aircraft, you will have much less warranty claims in the future. That also helps to reduce your operating cost as a business, and that would increase the relationship level between yourself and your clients. And of course, Section 9, any supplement materials that you'd be able to provide on the aircraft, that might be upgrades on the aircraft, moved on from that one particular airframe, have done some minor changes on it. We'll put it all in the supplement section. And section number 10, which is the very last part, we will talk about the operational tips. So from our operation experience, for example, when we go out and spray whitewash is very similar to a white paint that they use to paint over a greenhouse to reduce the UV light that goes into the greenhouse and increases the temperature of the greenhouse. One of the operating tips that we'll give to the client will be, well, you probably want to glad wrap your aircraft before flight, because then you don't have to spend that much time scrubbing the white paint off the aircraft. Like little things like that, what we find most of our operators and pilots and clients do appreciate. And those are the things that, it will be good to share to the customer. Now, this is an example of our operations manual. It is quite intense. It talks from everything about the operations, the aircraft, the internal training, to normal operations, to specialized operations. If any of these contents interest any of our operators, please feel free to ask the question at the end of this presentation. And also, one of the big things that CASA look at is risk assessment. Throughout a lot of our operations, we do go out on site, or before, if we can't be on site, we gather as much information from the actual farm owner to find out what are the hazards, what do we prepare for, what sort of chemicals that we're going to apply, what PPE that we're going to bring, to better prepare for our operation, and also to better to come up for our risk register, so a risk assessment. Is the actual operation even worth going? Is it within the actual level of risk that we can actually accept? If it's not, is there anything that we can actually reduce the risk, to mitigate the risk, to bring it down? And after we bring it down, does it do come into the actual acceptable level of risk that we can actually go out to do that operation? These are some of the basic laws and regulations here in Australia. Flying a drone, you must not fly it any higher than 120 meters or 400 feet. The reason for that is for manned aviation, they cannot come below 500 feet unless in an emergency. You must keep your drone in a cylindrical shape, 30 meters away from any general public that's not involved in the operation. They can come closer than 30 meters, so to 15 meters if you have their prior consent. And of course, with the people that's involved in the operations, they can be closer than 15 meters, 50 meters as well. Now, you'll not be able to, so basically what the rest of the actual graph is saying, the drones have least amount of priority over anything. So over any cars, houses, publics, humans, even pets, you've got to get out of their way, okay? So that's what basically the next diagram says. And 5.5 kilometers from airports, unless you have prior approval. You must keep the aircraft within visual line of sight. You must not fly over any public area or any area that have any public gathering. Emergency services, you got to be out of all those areas. Now, having emergency procedure in place or emergency plan in place, it is very important. These emergency procedures are listed in our operations manual and procedure, and best to have all your operators to read it and understand it, and maybe actually go through and refresh it with them from time to time, so they actually know what they're looking at, what to react and how to react if an emergency does happen. And this is just some of the examples that we have. So loss of control of the aircraft, a flyaway happens, then, if the situation allows to put in ADI mode, and in our case we can't, some of the previous aircrafts we can, but this is just a quick response checklist available for the operators. Clear the flight area, how to notify the people, make sure one person definitely remains line of sight of the aircraft at all times. And, if required, of course, inform emergency services. And in Australia, it's also a legal requirement for you to file an incident report or accident report. When the pilot's flying unwell, before we take flight in Australia, we go through a safety checklist. This safety checklist is quite commonly used in many industries. So it's what we call an I'm Safe checklist. In that link there, you'll be able to go in and find out what that model is all about. So it's basically illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and eating. Have you checked that before you go out and making sure yourself or your crew is okay? If a crew or pilot becomes unwell, it's best to go through with the rest of the crew that's there how to respond. So in this case, when the actual pilot becomes unwell, then another crew's response is make sure to clear of the area, activate the aircraft to return to home, follow the instructions of the pilots. If the pilot's unsure where the landing area is safe or not, make sure you activate the return to home or find an alternate landing site, monitor the aircraft until the aircraft landed and shut down, and attend to the pilot. Now, following up actions would again involve in contacting emergency services. Now, if the pilot's not unwell, you might need to call ambulance for him, and also filing the actual incident report. The following one is basically having public entering the flying area. How to respond to that. See if you can actually move the aircraft away from where the public is. Having the crew to inform or notify the public if it's okay. If not, you can just land the aircraft, communicate with the public, and start your operation and resume your operation. Now, this is, oops, sorry. Jump one forward. Right there. Okay. Now, another procedure that we normally follow and also brief our operators on is the pesticide use and the risk and safety of the use of the pesticide. How to use clean water to mix the pesticide, never use dirty water to do so. Stay in the upwind area when spraying herbicides. This is, some of them is basic knowledge that people have common sense, but it's always good to brief the common sense as well, just in case that person is not all there that day. The person that you're operating have not experienced in that particular environment. And always have extra PPE on hand, so personal protective gear on hand. Always get yourself and pilots to clean your hands, clean your skin after using pesticide, and try not to make any contact with your eyes and ears and mouth during the operation. It's important to give our systems a thorough clean. We have actually one incident with one of our operators. He have never ever cleaned the aircraft. Eventually, because after a previous incident, one of the seals had broken and the actual chemical got into the aircraft, eventually causing an accident. That wasn't, so pleasant. So checking the aircraft system, it is very important, and always important to learn from your mistake. If you ever do make a mistake, it's important you learn from it. That's why we write a report, not to let other people know, but also to educate ourselves as well. It's important not to contaminate rivers and any source of drinking water. So you got to definitely look at your runoff and the possibility of runoff as well. Now, the effective use of the chemicals are based on many, many different factors: the density of the chemical, the spray rate, spray distance, aircraft speed, wind directions, your temperature, humidity. Just try to consider as many factors as possible. Then you look at your delta T. Those are all the factors that you got to take into account before you use chemicals. The reason that we go through all of that is, again, try to make sure all our operators is as prepared as possible, as knowledgeable as possible before they do go out and face the real world. And otherwise, you will have a very upset customer or farmer in the very end. This is, again, a quick video of our special operations. This is on landline. This is one of the previous model aircraft. You can see it's a 2018 P30. But again, this having a farmer talking about, you know, some of our operations and just give everyone an idea in terms of our Australian operation, how we prepare and handle it.
It looks like science fiction, but it's science fact. This is a type of weed control.
This is the future. And from what I've seen today, every farm, whether they be small or large, will have a benefit out of this type of agriculture.
In a good year, Garth Short's 32-hectare farm would be thriving, with up to 1,500 layer hens rotating with sheep and cattle and a greenhouse filled with basil. But it's his third winter without rain. His chickens have gone, so has his basil, and he's drastically reduced his breeding ewes and cows by about half. One thing he hasn't been able to compromise, though, is weed control.
These are the ones that are really causing us some heartache. This broadleaf thistle here, very hard to get rid of.
Normally, he'd pay a contractor about $3,000 plus the cost of herbicide to spray his 15 paddocks. But he's found a much cheaper, easier solution.
Start after 5 seconds. Keep far away from UAV.
This is what's called a swarm. Giant drones targeting individual weeds that have been identified earlier by a Sentry drone. To spray the entire farm would cost about $1,200.
Everything that you see here today is fully automated. There's no pilot. The pilot only needs to stand here and supervise, but the aircraft does the whole flight fully autonomously.
Charles Chow's company is an Australian-owned subsidiary of the Chinese giant XAG. His cutting-edge technology can reach areas that are difficult to access, such as gullies and fence lines, and avoid sensitive sites like dams. While it's more about potential than common practice right now, he reckons drones can be a new force in agriculture, providing jobs and opportunities.
By introducing something cool that's high tech into the rural areas have helped us to actually get the younger generation back into farming.
Now, this is just some of our Australian operations that I'd like to share, and hopefully that will be able to capture some people's imaginations. So again, this is our effort in bushfire recovery. We have a massive bushfire here in Australia back in 2018, which have burnt out a lot of our forestry. Now, greening in Australia is very, very important. Every year, Australian government spends a lot of money in terms of land recovery. Sorry, let me just correct that. Okay, and the following video actually shows our efforts and what we have participated with the local land care groups to do the land recovery efforts that we have using our XAG technology. And here is the video of what we've done.
So it's really exciting, actually. We're embarking on a bit of a program with the landholders and with Heytesbury Landcare Group to put the finishing touches on our fire recovery program from the Southwest fires from 2018. And so this project's really looking at trying to do some direct seeding using the drones and using this pretty new technology to get out into the middle of these fire-affected peat swamps and trying to repair some of the damage that was done.
Lake Cobraco is basically surrounded by farmland. The whole of the swamp, other than the water body, is actually owned by 3 or 4 landholders. That's a fairly unique situation.
It's always been a pretty nice place to look over the hill at. It floods in winter and grows all sorts of stuff. You have swans and all sorts of birds and stuff there.
The main reason this area in particular was so hard hit in the 2018 fires was it's a peat swamp. So the ecology and the geology of this system here means that when the fire came into this area, the peat swamp ignited, the peat material ignited, which is a really, really dense material that goes down a number of metres through this area. And so when that caught fire at a really deep in the profile of the soil, it took a long time for firefighting resources to be able to manage the fire and put it out.
Of course, when fire comes through, we have these extraordinary images of the soil being burned out from underneath the trees, and the trees basically suspended in the landscape by the roots. So it's quite an amazing sight where usually it's the reverse of the trees burned down and then the soil is left intact.
The vegetation community that is within the lake bed was severely impacted by the fire. And we have had some recovery within the area, but where we haven't had that recovery, this is where this technology can be used to actually help put seed back into areas that aren't showing signs of recovery. Some of the farmers lost vegetation, some of them lost buildings, and some of them had to deal with the smoke that came out of the peat for a number of weeks after the fire had come through. We live about 1 kilometre north from the Cobraco Lake, our house is. Our farms all around it. The fires come through and pretty much burnt out, a lot of our peatlands. Yeah, it's a lot of area we couldn't use. We couldn't live at home for a couple of months because it was too smoky and carbon monoxide and all that sort of jazz. So it has a pretty long lasting effect on what we do as a business and a family. We've done a lot of work with adjoining landowners in revegetating and re-establishing shoulder belts. And the thought process came about as to how do we recover a peat swamp or a lake without, kind of introducing human interference, and basically found a drone company who've done quite extensive work in the way of, seeding and chemical spraying, and saw it as basically a new option or a new technique to kind of help in recovery.
It's unsafe to go in on certain sections of Lake Cobraco, and by using drones, it allows us to reseed the burnt out sections of the swamp.
We'll definitely be able to actually get the seeds or the actual liquid straight on target. So less drift, less wastage of chemical or seeds. Our accuracy level, or positioning accuracy level, is down to 2 centimetres horizontally and 10 centimetres vertically. So the aircraft's capable of attaching 2 different payload system on it. One is your liquid spraying component, which allows you to do liquid application, and also a granular, which is already attached onto the aircraft right there. But what we also have here is your surveying aircraft as well. So that's our scouting aircraft. So that's the actual eyes for the system. That will enable to actually capture all the information that we need for the application aircraft to go and apply that particular data that we capture. For example, the terrain information, the health of the actual plants itself. So where it actually needs more fertilizer, where it needs less.
We've been lucky with this Cobraco sort of community here. They took an impact with the fire, but since that, and we've been going through the recovery phase with them, they've been really open and really trusting of us coming in and doing this sort of innovative approach to recovery.
So it's pretty exciting, I guess. We've got some pretty whiz-bang bits of equipment here that are going to plant some trees and hopefully make the place look a bit prettier and take some water out of the ground so we don't have any salinity issues and things like that are quite a worry for us.
We're wanting to help the environment re-establish and still give some homes to, the native birds and animals that do exist along the lake bed. Southwest Victoria has quite a large number of volcanic peat swamps around. And the concern is future fire potential means that we may have more of these fires in time. And getting at least some understanding as to whether or not it's a technique that it can be used in recovering areas such as Cobra Kai Lake means that it can potentially be used more broadly within this region if we do by chance have more peat fires.
One feature of the project is that we're aerial seeding half of it to see how the plants grow back or re-establish themselves. Some areas we're not seeding, and the idea is to get a comparison between the two. So if there is no difference between areas aerial seeded and those that are not, then you could sort of say from that natural recruitment is the way to go. And so yes, I guess it's effectively a trial from that point of view. When peat burns out, it's kind of not safe in some areas to go there. So we can demonstrate that drones are a useful technology. We can also present this as I guess a test case to delve into other bodies to say that when it comes to restoration of the landscape after a fire, and particularly in the peat body or water body, this is a really good way to go.
The project that we're implementing here at Cobra Kai Lake is a really big sign of how organisations such as government departments, land care groups and private businesses can kind of work together in a collaborative network to basically help solve problems. It shouldn't all be just the landowners or land care or the Department Forest and Fire. This project shows that collaborative networking is a really good way of working together to meet a common goal.
And here's some of our local research partners and supporters. And the reason that we collaborate with all these people is to come up with our safety operating procedures and training. We need their high level of specializations in their field. To give you a very good example is working with the Department of Private Industries, we know what the government requirements are. Working with people like nutrients, we know what the suppliers of chemicals are looking for. And also looking for working with universities like University of Sydney, University of Queensland, that would help us to identify and prove to the legislators, yes, our newer methods have worked, or this particular training method have worked, and have it push it through the legislators and make it a common sense and a requirement throughout the industry. And yeah, this is the end, and I'm sorry I went a bit longer on my presentation. If there is any questions, would love to hear from it at the round table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you so much for emphasizing the importance of receiving proper training for a pilot, elaborating on the steps to become a qualified operator, and sharing the idea of your training course design, and which are really valuable experience and might be really helpful to other partners. And now let's take a 5-minute to break, and you can send your questions to the chat box during the break. Could you please send the questions to the chat box during the break time? Okay, let's see these questions one by one. First, Marius from Baltic, can you please explain more in depth about preparation for spring? How properly prepare for it, considering weather conditions, what chemicals you are allowed to use in Australia? Are they certified for dropping from the air? Can you share with the chem list with us? Thanks. Question from Baltic.
Okay. Now, Marius, thank you for your question. That's a very good question. Actually, we get commonly asked that a lot through training. Now, preparation of the chemicals are normally shown on the actual label of the chemical itself. Now, how to actually prepare it, it's also in the actual instruction itself in terms of what the water rate is, what sort of conditions that you'd be able to apply the actual product in. Generally speaking, we try to, during the daytime, we try to have at least, it can't be completely calm because then the actual chemicals will be suspended in the air. We like to have a wind speed of at least 3 kilometers per hour. However, try not to be exceeding 11 kilometers an hour, but we have tested our aircraft systems, even up to 26 k's an hour. Our system using a medium to coarse droplet size have not shown any spray drift at all. Now, the chemicals that's allowed to be sprayed or released by our system in Australia, we follow a standard rule of if the product is approved for aerial applications for manned aviation, then it is approved for drone aerial applications as well. However, in Australia, the legislation does say that you be able to use other products that's not been approved for aerial application to get an off-label permit, but that process, it is quite extensive and is quite expensive as well. At the moment, we haven't faced a particular farmer that's willing to do it. That's why we work with chemical companies like Nutrient that's willing to back that funding to achieve that goal if we have a certain project at hand.
Thanks, Charles. And next question, Arthur from the United States. Did customer ask for spray productivity and factors with fly speed, spray volume, spray width, etc. for different crop and use cases? How do you prepare for these productivity questions?
Yeah, again, that's a very common question we get asked. Now, productivity of our systems, depending on which systems that you're working with. Are you working with a P30, an XP, P40, a V40, or P100? I know for most of our international operators, we don't have the P100 yet. But just say, for example, of the XP, the P30, or V40, the productivity of our systems comes down to your application rate per hectare. Now, most of the aerial products that we'll be able to apply in Australia, it's somewhere between 30 to 50 litres per hectare. I'll give you an example. XAG or DJI or any other manufacturer, but to say XAG claims our P30 unit are able to do 14 hectares an hour or up to 14 hectares an hour. But realistically, at the application rate of 30 to 50 litres hectare, what you realistically be able to achieve is roughly about 4 to 6 hectares an hour. So when we're trying to look at productivity, when we look at quoting people, we use on those figures. And of course, to prepare for different missions and to decide of how to charge the customer, we actually sent out a questionnaire for the customer to answer. In Australia, in a lot of our cases, the customer or the farmer do provide the chemical. We don't provide the chemical, so any quotation that we provide to the client does not include the chemical. It's purely the labour, the aircraft equipment, and also the transit. to get there. You have also mentioned the flight speed. Now, the downdraft of the aircraft of our CDA and our aircraft design, the downdraft propels our chemicals to the products or crops very well, or the weeds that we're trying to attack. We always try to achieve the maximum speed that we can. That's made possible by the dosage. Then we'll be able to cover more area. The spray volume, it's determined by the label itself. The spray swath or the spray width, it's determined by the height of the aircraft. Now, the height is affected by a few factors. Factor number one is how difficult it is terrain. If it's completely flat, then you'll be able to fly nice and low, maybe 1.5 meters above ground level, above crop level. But if it's hilly terrain or undulating terrain, then you're gonna have to be flying a bit higher. That will also affect your spray swath. And of course, the lower that you are, the narrower your spray swath, and the higher that you are, the larger the spray swath. Now, on a P30, for example, the 2019 P30, the largest effective spray swath is about 5.5 meters. But on the newer aircraft like the V40, you can go up to about 10 meters to be its effective spray swath. But that can be achieved at around 4.5 to 5 meters above ground level. Now, flying at that height also comes down to the local wind conditions as well. It is very important to bring a portable weather meter that you'll be able to track. To always record the wind speed, wind directions, your delta T, your temperature. It is very important throughout the day of the operations as well, and that also help you to manage the changes of the actual weather conditions. In Australia, we do actually have spray insurance, and under that insurance requirement also requires you to record those data to prevent, or just in case if you do need to claim the insurance, you have to prove to the insurance company these data are recorded. Now, I think the next question is from Russia.
Yes, from Russia. We also get this before.
How many training hours shall one execute to be truly ready for work? Now, Australian legal requirement is 10. What we find, 10 hours will probably be able to get the pilot their learner license. But in Australia, to get your REPL, remote pilot's license, is 5 hours, and they require another 5 hours on type. So to say, if you want to get a type endorsement on the V40, you need to do another 5 hours on that aircraft type for you to be licensed on it. So that's the minimum requirement. What we find from our internal training is I will not let anyone, my pilot out there by themselves with less than 50 hours of training. However, this would be deferred from pilot to pilot, person to person, and also the background as well. If they're an aviator before, then they do have a 3-dimension or 4-dimension thinking mindset already. People who haven't got that aviation experience, does take longer to get to that level. But my personal recommendation, if it's my equipment, if I want to let that person out on their own, I will at least put 50 hours on them under supervision before I let them to take a crew or set of equipment out, my equipment out on the field. And next
one last
is
question. Yeah, I want to know, do you have any experiences in the use of herbicides for barley, wheat, and flaxseed?
Yes, we do. And what sort of, can you explain that question a little bit further?
Okay, I guess he just want to know some cases if you have applied the herbicides to those crops.
Yes, we have. So if you have any particular sort of questions. Now, from country to country, the herbicides that we use is different. And of course, the rate of applications and all of that might be different as well. So if you want, you can feel free to send me an email or give headquarter a more in-depth question list. Either myself or my chief pilot will be able to help you to answer it. And see if I can help you with your operation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your profound answering and your splendid presentation today. And our webinar today is coming to an end. Thanks, Charles. And also thanks to all of the attendees for your active participation. And if you want to be the speaker, please do not hesitate to contact us. And see you next time. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.